High up in the Smoky Mountains, about 30 miles west of Asheville, North Carolina, is a former amusement park that had to close numerous times and was in a great deal of debt. This place was a successful regional park in 1960s, complete with all the charm one could anticipate from its Old West theme and distinctive setting. But when the era of prosperity faded, a period of tiresome difficulty began. We'll find out how this extravagant neighborhood theme park began and how it deteriorated over the years. This and more here at Lux Craze. This ghost town village, originally known as Ghost Town, was founded by R.B. Coburn, a native of North Carolina. Bringing themed entertainment to his home state was a huge opportunity in his eyes. Coburn made the decision to bring the Old West to North Carolina after being inspired by the numerous ghost towns in Western America and the general fascination the country had with it. With more than $1 million invested in 1960, he bought Buck Mountain in the community of Maggie Valley and practically cut off the top so that it could be built on top of the mountain. Coburn directed the construction of the 40 or so buildings that make up the recreated old western town that fills the park. The amusement park soared into the sky, reaching a height of over 4,000 feet or 1,200 meters, giving park visitors an exciting way to ascend to the theme park. In order to get those passengers up the steep gradient into the distinctive hilltop ghost town, the steepest double incline railway in America was built, and this became quite popular as early as June 1961. As soon as the park opened, visitors from all over the world descended upon this unusual theme park. The aptly titled Ghost Town in the Sky was appropriate for the time because planned gunfights would break out in the streets every day, allowing everyone a chance to experience the excitement. Pop culture was also enamored with the Old West at the time. In 1962, a chairlift was quickly constructed, providing visitors another approach to the summit. During the course of about a decade, the park rose to prominence as one of North Carolina's most visited tourist destinations and a very competitive regional theme park. The mountaintop park was actually quite small. However, it was made up of 3 different varyingly elevated territories. Visitors may go to the Indian Village, Mountain Town, and Mining Town, all of which were immersive adventures to live out their own fan fiction of being in that era. During the early 1970s, more than 400,000 tourists a year were visiting the ghost town in the sky, but R.B. Coburn didn't stop there. He also opened 2 other parks, one in North Carolina and the other in Florida, both with related themes. After they were all up and running quite smoothly, he actually focused on other ventures. He ultimately decided to sell Ghost Town through a stock swap. This involves swapping one asset, in this case a theme park, for a portion of the firm you are trading your asset with. Despite significant expansion during this time, the park's visitors' numbers did slightly fall until the 1980s. The park's core was mostly untouched by the new proprietors, and it remained that way for a while without any exhilarating attractions. Strangely enough, Coburn had really bought the theme park in 1986. He was aware of this decline though, and in 1988 he added the Red Devil, which now is the park's most important feature. Through the 1990s, a few more attractions were added, but the original attendance numbers from the 1970s simply weren't being recorded. This steel roller coaster had one inversion, and about 80% of the track cantilevered over the side of the hill. Due to the decline in routine park maintenance, the rides began to malfunction more frequently. The fun and adventurous park it had begun was no longer the word of mouth on the spread, and the ghost town at the sky was now beginning to resemble an old, boring park that wasn't worth your money. The park was losing much more by the end of the 2002 season. Therefore, Coburn decided not to reopen it in 2003. Instead, the park stood trembling and abandoned for the following few years until a new firm bought it in 2006. Coburn's 30-year reign of designing and operating the park had finally come to an end, and now Ghost Town Partners LLC, a new holding company, plans to revive the park. In fact, they accomplished this, spending several $1 million to bring the park back up to speed in May 2007. Nonetheless, the major attractions including the incline railway, train, and roller coaster were left out of these renovations. Despite this, there was widespread enthusiasm for the reopening. Unfortunately, this enthusiasm would not last into the following year. Tourism suffered significantly in 2008 as a result of the housing crisis, forcing park owners to abandon many of their long-term plans. The Red Devil, now called the Cliffhanger, had been reopened for only a few days before it had to be shut down once more owing to a failed safety inspection, but money was still being invested in the park and its attractions. It's understandable that the coaster was plagued by problems and had to be shut down within months or even days after its reopening. This was because it was created by less well-known businesses and constructed on a fairly cheap budget. The park somewhat quickly filed for bankruptcy protection after repairs, with the site slipping into disrepair and attendance not high enough to offset those costs. They owed their creditors more than $2.5 million, and Ghost Town in the Sky had once again closed by the end of the 2009 season. The amusement park remained closed atop the mountain despite an unsuccessful attempt by a third party to buy the property. A retaining wall on top of the mountain that was supposed to hold the earth in place had crumbled while it was closed in February 2010. This led to a major mudslide down the mountain, and a portion of the service road to the park was totally buried, affecting close to 40 nearby residences. These neighbors actually filed a lawsuit against the park, alleging that the proprietors had neglected to maintain the retaining wall despite knowing that it might collapse by the end of the year. With debts totaling more than $10 million, Ghost Town was deeply in the red and had no intention of reopening the park. In the end, the property was repossessed and was going to be auctioned off to the highest bidder. This is when Alaska Presley came in. She is a charismatic local businesswoman who was involved in the park's early development. She placed the winning offer of $2,500,000 during the auction in 2012. She wished to quickly reopen the park in its current state. The initial intention was to complete the required renovations and start things going by reopening the gift store at the mountain's foot in June 2012. As cleanup efforts on the access road and crucial ride repairs were underway, the park was partially reopened that summer. The same would hold true for the ensuing year as well. The park had a very long list of things it needed to address as a result of current laws and codes that hadn't been followed by the original proprietors. Despite all of this, Presley was prepared to extend the park with a brand new area she termed Resurrection Mountain. This was geared around a Christian concept, and it would be completed with a substantial cross that would be visible for many miles and perhaps serve as the park's new emblem. Nonetheless, the land had several difficulties and progress was slow. The same could be said for their season openings in 2014 and 2015. With the park announcing a significant refurbishment and a new name before the end of the 2015 season, it was evident that Alaska wasn't doing all that well. Ghost Town Village reportedly changed the motif of the old western town to an Appalachian village after scrapping many of its original rides because they were too expensive to maintain. The Holy Land-themed portion of the park was still a possibility, and they assured that the popular gunfight shows would continue. The park, however, was put up for sale just a few months later in June 2016, proving that the idea was ultimately doomed and a complete failure. Presley gave up on the property once more, and the location saw a number of possible purchasers as well as a number of unfulfilled promises to reopen. The park did eventually find a buyer who paid $5 million for the entire 250 acres of land that were up for sale. They now had a bold plan to upgrade the park to a far larger facility by investing $200 million over the following 10 years. These proposals include a brand new shopping area that may include apartments, a new hotel, and renovated versions of the existing buildings with a modernized supporting infrastructure. But to further complicate matters, Alaska Presley passed away in August 2022. She did in fact sell her land before she passed away, but she had contracts with this new firm for future development. She had money invested in it as well, which just served to complicate and confuse matters even more. This brings us to the present, since the park hasn't undergone any significant changes. It is astonishing how frequently Resurgence has been left empty for extended periods of time before abruptly reopening to visitors. The park is slated to be abandoned with some maintenance to keep up with the deterioration since that day. Despite all the good intentions of a dedicated businesswoman, it is simply absurd. Given all the information, it's difficult not to have some skepticism about the new $200 million initiative and their likelihood of moving forward. However the future unfolds, this park will always be remembered as a classic. That's where we conclude today's video on the Ghost Town theme park. What are your thoughts about it? Was it doomed from the start? Write these down in the comment section below. Also, like the video and subscribe to us here at Lux Craze. It really helps us out. And hey, see you in the next video.